Well, the highlight of my week is Alina's back. Hey, Alina, thanks for coming through.
Thank you. It's always a lot of fun to come by.
Well, we had a bit of a chat before we started, and we had some subject matter we were going to cover, but Alina says, I've got a better idea.
I do. I read a couple of days ago in The Listener the article about the Bank of Mum and Dad, and I think it's pretty relevant. And it sparked a huge debate on both LinkedIn and Facebook and most of my social channels. So I thought it would be nice to get your
Well, it's
perspective.
quite good because look at my age. I'm in my 60s, and you're in your 20s. So, we've got a perspective from both sides. So it'd be great to explore how we feel about this.
I am not sure I have any problem with having parents help kids get on their feet when they're first starting out.
How far would you let it go? Would you expect your parents to help you buy a house?
I would.
You would. Because, that's something I would never have expected. And the mortgage. I think when I recall, Mum and Dad had a mortgage of $6,000. So that was their responsibility. And when I moved out, it was mine. And how far further? So if you're a businesswoman, and if your business was struggling for a period of time, do you think they would be there for you?
I wouldn't expect them to be there for me for that. That's a very different to getting you on your feet and
That's
getting you
interesting.
started. I think if your business is going bad for whatever reason, you need to first assess why it's going bad. And if the reason is bad management or bad life situation, COVID and everything, then it's probably more dignified at that moment to go find a 9-to-5 job or pivot your business to be more productive. That's not what
Well,
parents' money is for.
It's interesting because you're saying like business is different, Max. I think what I'll explore further. What you're saying, getting on my feet, getting into a flat, or living with. They should help me, but when it comes to business, it's completely different. That's interesting. Now, what happens if you come across this fantastic idea? Somebody's tapped you on the shoulder and said, I've got this idea, and you go, wow, I can see the potential in this, but I need some capital, some seed capital to get it running. Would you approach them then?
I would, but I'd approach them like any other investor with an end goal, an end amount of returns offering, a plan of action. It wouldn't be,
You'd have a
hey,
business plan, in other words.
you would.
Would you have expectations of them?
I would expect them to grill me harder than any other investor.
So you pay interest on your loan?
Um,
Say you needed $100,000.
mhm.
So you put a plan together, which looks quite feasible on paper,
Mhm.
and you say, all right, I need 100,000. Would you be prepared to pay? Would you expect to pay interest to your parents for that?
I wouldn't have a problem paying, but I honestly have never come across this because I've never asked my parents for money for business. My gut says that I don't think they'd have a problem with offering interest-free loan. I think in their mind it's the same as getting an interest-free loan from university or from student funding.
Well, do you know what would be more interesting is would you be resentful if they didn't give it to you interest-free or said to you, no, you're on your own. You start from the beginning and you find your own finance?
Not at all. Mostly because the other areas where I did need help, I got help.
From them?
Yes. Yeah. It's not starting a business venture isn't the same as making sure you have a roof over your head.
Because I can say to you that a lot of parents would say, and particularly my era, tough luck. You're on your own. I never had any help. You'll hear that one. When I was your age, I never got any help. You find your own way. And that probably does happen a lot today.
I think it's not fair to judge the actions of every parent, because in some cases it might be a matter of them being able to afford it. In other cases it might be that they've got a freeloading asshole for a kid, pardon my French.
You will understand what you're meaning.
It's different case by case.
Yeah.
So in my case, I started working with them for their respective businesses from a very young age. And it was never a conversation about money. It was just, you do this to help family, and family comes back to help you. And, it's, I guess in the sense of I got business support because for the first couple of months when I was looking for my very first client to pay rent and to pay food, I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to have a 9 to 5 while also looking for clients and getting that side hustle, which meant I still got to have a nightlife. I still got to go out with friends. I still
Well,
had a sort of the ability to live while also chasing my dream. And it didn't last for long. I didn't freeload off them for long, but it was just that additional support that I got that I think made a huge difference in my confidence in venturing out and starting a business, and the fearlessness to do it, you know?
Oh yeah.
That's big. Like, you're not worried about not having a meal ticket the next hour because you know your parents, they might not be happy about it, but they'll help you out, you know? And my dad's a property developer, and it's sort of a family business as well, so I might be paying rent to this house, but and to my dad, but I'm paying a lot less than the house itself is worth. That's also a
Wow.
big support thing.
So let me tell you about me then. My parents did help me buy a car when I did an apprenticeship, which was paying $25 a week. I think I started at $15 a week, and it would get up to 25. And so my parents helped me buy a car. I had to pay them back, no interest. That's interesting. So that was in the 60s. Now, when I came out of my apprenticeship, I went and worked somewhere which gave me a substantive increase, like was in the oil industry. And a friend of mine I used to play rugby with got me aside, and he was a banker. Said, Max, I want to show you how to save because you're going to have a substantive amount more money than you used to. And I said, yeah, let's try and put together some savings. Would you like to? He said, yeah, well, let's do it. So then about a year later, I was in a very good position to buy, wait for it, which I thought was huge, a one-way ticket to London. And I did it. I went on my own and travelled to London. I got up there and I went to Aberdeen thinking I'd get a job straight away back on the oil rigs, and it wasn't happening. And I got into the bars and started drinking with the other guys who couldn't get a job, and we just used to really swell it down all day. Lovely, great times. Then I realised I'm out of money. And with that, I didn't go to the bank of mum and dad. I went and lived in the back of rather than a bed and breakfast, I lived in the back of somebody's van and stayed there and pulled myself together. And I was offshore within a week. But that was a serious wake-up time for me. You can't party all your life. So that life lesson, God, I'm a hypocrite because my daughter upstairs, I don't think I'd let her go through that. I'd be there
Girls
for her.
and boys are different as much as we want to admit equality. It's a lot scarier for a girl to be on her own homeless than a boy.
You know, this is very difficult for me because this is why it's a good subject. And I'm thinking a lot of people would be thinking from my perspective because I want to protect my daughter. It's my nature. I've been born to do it. I'm the man of the house. I'm the physically stronger. I protect her at all costs. And I mean financial costs too, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we are in our generation is critical of your generation, not being resilient, not being able to cope with life too well, and have high expectations. Well, who's created that? I think we did. We've created that because that's what I'm prepared to do now for my daughter, and maybe I'm not helping her. Now, what's your perspective of that?
Boy who cried wolf. I think that the only times I've ever actually asked my parents for financial support, it was what I would consider pertinent circumstances. I ended up missing, for various reasons, my flight got delayed when I first moved overseas to Israel to start my degree, and so I had to spend 3 days not in the student dorms and basically homeless if I didn't have my parents say, grab the family credit card and go get yourself a hotel for 3 days. Don't be an idiot. And that was of course I paid them back afterwards, but it was just the safety of having that family money to travel. You know, and I could have figured it out. I definitely could have. I could have found a hostel, or I could have, waited tables for a couple
Or
days.
did what I did. You go and sleep in
couch
somebody's
surfing.
van. Yeah.
But, it's just not, it was hugely important for me to know that my parents had my back when I left. Because I'm a cautious person. I'm not someone who goes all in all the time. And so it was a big step for me to take to go overseas especially to the Middle East, of all places. And just knowing that my parents were not supporting me, but they were around and they were there to help.
This subject appeals to me on the basis that the financial institutions and people can't buy a home anymore. The young ones can't.
Mm-hmm.
So the bank and mum and dad step up. Sometimes. Is it our obligation as parents to do that for someone, say, at your age?
Again, I think it's a personal decision, and it depends on what it is you're helping them fund. So for me, again, having that support when I first started my business was everything, because it was just a good financial push. And I could have made it on my own. I definitely could have, after a couple of years of saving, gotten the buffer I needed to start my own business. But it just sped the process along, and isn't every parent's goal to help their kids grow?
What would you think of a parent that was very financially well off and said to their 20-something-year-old, you're on your own, but I need money for a house. I need to get more comfortable because where I'm living now is a squalor, and they're sharing with 7 others, and they have got 2 in their room, and it's just unhygienic, cold, unhealthy place. What's your judgment of those parents? And folks out there, what would your judgment be of those parents?
Well, first I'd double check if the kid actually had a problem with that. I know a couple people who live like that, and they have no real problems with it. They enjoy the atmosphere of having all their 8 best friends in drinking. But if it really was a problem and they didn't feel safe, would probably be the point where I suggested that the parents interject, as if you don't feel safe in that environment, or if it's beginning to affect your day-to-day work. So in some cases, especially when everyone went into lockdowns, people were working on their beds with 7 other people. It was like a telemarketing institution out in the Philippines, when it's that crowded. And in those cases, I do think parents need to help, at the very least to offer them to come back home for the work days.
So there we have it. Lena's thoughts were that parents that are comfortably well off and should assess...
I don't think it has to be comfortably well off. I don't think it has to just be financial. I think if someone realizes that they have a kid who's working 12, 14-hour days, they could, throw a couple meals together for them 2-3 times a week and throw them at them. But it doesn't really address the other perspective, which is when the adults get older, the kids come in and start helping them? Because in my family, that's absolutely the case.
See, both perspectives are aligned with almost abuse. It could be abused. So we get, from an older person's perspective, the young person could say, hey, look, you're comfortable, you don't have a mortgage anymore. Admittedly, you're not earning as much, but you're comfortable. You could actually mortgage a house and let me have a home, rather than me going renting with a whole lot of other students or younger people. And be angry with their parents if they don't.
I can't speak to those people. In that situation, I would never ask my parents to buy me a house. I'm talking help me find a rental that is a little more comfortable, so that I can, put on my face without 7 other people trying to share a bathroom with me in the morning. I'm not saying they need to buy me a house for it. The Mum and Dad
says that to me is almost it's available to some young people. Should they exploit it? Well, that's a big word. But should they use it, or should they exploit it, or should they completely walk away from it? What is ethically the right thing to do?
I agree. I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's a case by case, and I'd never take money where I thought it was just being given freely. I usually pay it all back, and it usually serves as a purpose to provide some support in a situation, or to help speed the life process along. And getting money for a mortgage from your parents doesn't mean that they have funded it and you're not going to pay them back. It just means that you can pay it back without making sure that you miss meals to do so. Like the banks would sometimes lead to that situation.
So I'm just getting your ideals and perspective here. What you're saying, if there is a need, a parent should step up if they've got the capabilities of doing that. And not all parents are, because some people on a pension are living on a pension and don't even have their own home, and they are having difficulties themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But we do see younger people sometimes leaning on those parents, particularly solo mums and things, and dads, probably solo dads, who land their children on the grandparents or their parents. And it's interesting to get a perspective on that, where the expectation should be, but the bank of mum and dad is just in its statement alone. What was the discussion online? You said it was really interested and almost was it heated or not?
It was pretty heated, and it was almost down the middle. It was people who were saying that parents should help when and if they can, and there was people who were saying I became far more financially literate without the parental support. And I ended up calling my dad and asking because I was just...
what was his response?
He said, of course you're more financially literate when you're left to do it on your own, but we supported you when you first started your business and when you first came back from Israel and things, because we didn't want you to live in a shoebox. We didn't want you to have to suffer or work 9 to 5 in order to achieve this dream. And it was our right to do so, and you're very financially literate now, 3-4 years later after you've started the business, and after life has happened to you, and you understand what saving looks like, and bad loans, and bad clients, or whatever. The way my dad sees it is that he just made sure that you had not just a buffer, but a faster growth rate than other kids my age. So there was that support.
A faster growth rate. So in your dad's perspective, he wanted to see you do better than your peers. And I don't think there's any problems with that. It's if he's got the means to do that, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would be concerned is where a parent goes too far and sacrifices a lot of their own to see their child go further. Child, their young adult. Yeah, so it is an interesting, but it's also a bit of a dilemma in our society, but maybe a necessary one right now because of the difficulty for young people. Well, we're going to drift off to another subject if I get into this, but do you see real estate as the future for young people to get a financial footing?
How do you mean?
Well, in the last decade or so, it's for years in New Zealand here, the dream is that you own your own home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's disappearing very quickly now. And that's something that you've been deprived of at your generation.
Very true.
Yeah. So should the bank of mum and dad step up and ensure that you have your own home to get your footing going? Or should the young person be left alone?
Oh, what? It's a case by case. I think if the parent can, then they should, because it is a footing. And it is just what you do to support family, at least where I'm from. I know that I would be supporting my family when my mum and dad, if they ever got too old to make decisions, in exchange for their help with my too young to make decisions, period. I do think that it depends on the competency of the young person, because there are jobs out there for young'uns who earn reasonably well. But it's either way, we wouldn't be having this conversation if the market wasn't as bad as it was. Because even parents would be willing to help, because it's normal.
I haven't thought this through, but if my daughter came to me and said, Dad, I've got a a business proposal, and I like it, and I want you to consider being a shareholder or becoming financing me into it. And I would the next question I'd say, well, what about a home for you? Do you need that? If she said, I think this is more important, I tell you what, I'd be proud.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be very proud, because I actually think that's the future of New Zealand, and to get the prosperity going, and our government should support that. You can hear me speed up, because actually I'm very sold on that idea. But if she said, I'd prefer to put it into a home, I'd be saying, well, let's have a look at the market and seeing whether it's going to be secure for you. And still a home is, isn't it? Would you... Oh, that's an interesting question for you then.
Mm.
If you face the dilemma, do I invest in a home or do I invest in a business? You're going to say it depends on the business and whether
And
it's...
the home.
And the home.
Sorry, bit of a politician with this whole debate.
Where's your preference?
I've got experience in both. Property development, family.
Yeah, you have too, yeah.
It would genuinely depend on the level of investment I could get out of the house. Because if the returns from the house, if you buy one, use the land, build another one, sell, it would be far exceeding the business. And so I'd get the house first, get that income, and use that to fund my business. But if it was just a regular house with very little land, with no expansion plans, if it wasn't on any sort of residential allowances for apartment building or anything like that, just a regular house, I'd probably pick a business.
Do you know, Alina, that's what makes you unique, and that's why you're sitting in that seat here. It's because I think you have an entrepreneurial flair, and you just said some key words. If that house looked like it was a good investment and was going to make, well, more or less, you didn't say these words, make me money, I might be keen to do it as a stepping stone to something else, which could be another business. And you went the other way. If the business was actually going to make me more profit, or perhaps more secure, or whatever it might be, which is important to you at the time, I might go there.
Yeah.
I don't think most people your age think that way.
Really?
You would know better than me.
I think entrepreneurial mindset isn't an age thing. It's just when you're ready to look around. And that is what entrepreneurship is. You just look around and you see what's out there, and you let the universe bring you opportunities.
What's your peers thinking? The peers you hang out with, which I think you hang out with business people, I'm not sure.
I hang out with both groups. On one side, I've got a group of people who are very happy to stay with their 9-to-5 jobs, and of course renting bothers them, and their aspirations are to get a house. But it's because renting is so unstable that the house represents stability of life. And so their whole goal is to be able to retire without having someone tell them when they have to move. From the entrepreneurial mindset, gamble big, win big is sort of how it is. And so they know that...
And lose big too.
Yeah, but they know that if they end up without a penny left to their name, they'll just restart. Because the first one's hard. Afterwards, you get used to the process. Yeah, but it's again, I'm not entirely sure that I would have had the confidence to start my business without the support I had from my family. And it came in a number of different ways, which was, look, worst comes to worst, we'll support you when you get home and you can get yourself another job. What do you have to lose? And that was the sentence that did it for me. Just the fact that I knew for the first 2-3 months I could go all out. I was supported by my family, and worst case scenario, 2 more months with them, and I'd go back to a 9-to-5 job.
And what was it, Maslow's law? You've got to have shelter, fresh air and love and all this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Once you got the basic foundations of life secured, and that's a home is one of them, or a means of actually having somewhere to live.
There is the opposite argument, which is a lot of entrepreneurs, especially some of the most successful ones in the world, started out with absolutely nothing. Like Disney was getting frostbite and toes cut off because he was a paper boy in the dead of winter. And it's something to be said with being used to not having that support and that bottom level. Because that's what you either get one spectrum where they're comfortable enough to risk it all because they know they've got the family support, And then you've got the other end, which is they never had the family support. There is no alternative. They have to kind of keep going.
My God, that drives you. If you've got to survive, that's when I was overseas in Scotland. If you've got to survive, I got a job within a week. I'd been there like a month, I think, and just floating around the bars, drinking with guys, and having a really good time. And then when I ran out of money, it just woke me.
But it wasn't survival. It was nothing left to lose.
Well, it's a bit of survival because I'm living in the back of a van. There was no such thing as a benefit in those days.
Yeah, but you don't have anything left to lose. You're already living in the back of a van.
Good point.
Whereas if you're looking at people who are doing the 9 to 5 and they have their belongings and they're looking for a stable home to put their belongings in, they could lose their belongings. That is something to lose.
You're quite right, because nothing to lose. I actually knocked on doors of these same drilling companies I was going to before, asking for work, with a complete different approach. I went and planned it in the back of that van for the next day, and it was very creative, and it worked. That's why I got a job out there pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you're quite right, and it does motivate.
Mm-hmm. So there's no looking back, because there's nothing back behind you. You're at that. There's no...
Something we need to talk about later on one day, but another subject is resilience. And I think this touches on it, because to drive you financially, you need to build up a bit of resilience. And the resilience to fear of inhibiting you to do it. Oh, no, I don't feel safe doing that.
Resilience comes from perspective. If you've been through it and it comes at you again, you're used to it and you're fine. But it only comes through time. I forgot what the quote is, but how I would wish to put an old man's brain in a young man's body. Paraphrased. But it's because an old man's already gone through everything. And so that's why they're wise. Not because they were born wise, but because they've been through it. Whereas a young man is still going through it, and it's why it takes them so long.
Yeah, I've heard that statement. I can't think of the right cliche
No,
as well.
Neither. Yeah,
yeah, young man with an old man's brain in him. Yeah, I can know the one. I used to call David Seymour that. I used to interview him, and he's like that. He's got such a lot of wisdom. Anyway, off subject. Do you want to conclude this with any wise statements?
It's not right to judge in one direction or the other. It's not right for your kids to take advantage of your goodwill. It's not right for parents to let their kids run wild in the opposite direction either. But if you have the ability to support your kids when they're going out through what can only be described as a much more difficult place than it was 3 years ago, let alone 50 years ago, if it's cooking meals, if it's providing a little bit of extra financial support so they don't have to worry that they might not pay rent the next week, I see nothing wrong with it. Because it's family. It is your flesh and blood who raised you. And in exchange, I think if you ever need something like a surgery, or you get old and you need to choose between a rest home and a caregiver or coming home, your kids won't bat an eyelash, because they'll remember this.